The chairman of the NTSB, Deb Hersman, is going to be calling to us in just a moment to give us her perspective. It's very early on the West Coast. It would be basically about 4:08 in the morning there, and she is going to be joining us via phone in just a few moments to give us the very latest on where that investigation stands. While we're waiting on that phone call, let me just sort of give you the basic facts of the case as we know them now. As you know, this 777 Boeing 777 jet was on approach to San Francisco Airport. We now know that apparently 1.5 seconds before impact, the cockpit voice recorder shows the pilot tried to abort the landing and do what is known as a go-around. They pushed the throttles to the firewall, and it didn't go well. The engines responded, but not in time. 4 seconds before that, there had been the stall warning heard in the cockpit, suggesting that they were losing airspeed. And Deb Hersman has said in the latest briefing that they were significantly below the 137 knot target landing speed. That's the speed that they want to be in as they come in. Clearly, they came in too low. They came in too slow. The angle was all wrong. The nose pitched up at the end. The tail broke off, went into the water. The rest of the details about how this all happened or why this all happened are now under investigation. 182 people were hospitalized. 123 people on that aircraft simply got up and walked away.
Yeah.
6 people were critically injured, and as you have heard by now, no doubt, 2 people were killed, thrown from the aircraft. One of them may have actually been killed by being run over by the arriving emergency equipment. The fire trucks, etc., that rolled out to the scene may have run over and killed one of them. The ILS system, the instrument landing system, was not in operation, but it had not been in operation since June 20th. And this is generally, in most modern jets, not seen as a problem, because there were, especially on the 777, there are said to be redundant systems aboard that negate the need for an ILS system. It's good to have. It's a nice backup, but not critical to landing, especially in clear weather. So the question now is, what went wrong? A lot of emphasis is being put on looking at this pilot. He was a very experienced pilot, but the vast majority of his experience was in the 747. And not in the 777, and they're very different aircraft in the way they're configured. The cockpit on the 747 is 3 stories high. Did you know that? 3 stories high.
Yeah.
It's 3 stories above the runway, and the 777 is much lower. So maybe that's something to take into consideration.
Yeah, officials are focusing very much on the speed, about why the jet was flying so slow at the time of approach. And, we're joined now by Deb Hersman. She's the chairwoman of the NTSB.
Deb, how are you?
Hi, I'm good.
Okay, so it's very early there, and I appreciate you getting up to be with us. Are there new details that you can share with us this morning about where the investigation is?
Well, one of the most important things for any of our investigations is actually to have good facts, good data, and we did get the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder. We had a preliminary readout yesterday, and it gave us some very good information that will help our investigators as we move forward.
As we understand it, the cockpit voice recorder showed that they tried to abort the landing just about a second and a half before impact, and that their stall warnings were heard inside the cockpit. What does that tell us?
That's right. 7 seconds before, the crew had a conversation that they recognized that they were slow. They were trying to achieve a target of 137 knots. They were well below that. They did recognize that 7 seconds before. 4 seconds before impact, they got a stick shaker activation. And what that is it's a vibration in the yoke of the airplane where they've got their hands. You can hear it. There's an aural sound. It's telling you that the airplane is about to stall if you don't do something to get it out of it. And then a second and a half before, they called for a go-around. This is the 2 pilots talking to each other, and they're calling for an aborted landing, and they want to go around and try again. So this is consistent with what we see on the flight data recorder, where we see their speed is slow, and we see that they try to apply throttle in the last seconds before crash, trying to spool those engines up.
Okay, so I know that you're always very careful about not wanting to draw conclusions before you have all the facts. but it does begin to appear that there was some bad judgments made in that cockpit.
Well, I think certainly we want to understand what was going on in the cockpit, how they were communicating with each other, how experienced they were, what the expectations as far as training and coordination. How much automation were they using versus, hand flying? And so I think we need to understand what was going on in the cockpit first before we draw any conclusions or make any judgments about the pilot's performance. But clearly the outcome of this flight was not what Asiana or any of those passengers expected.
Deborah Hersman is our guest, and she is the chairperson of the National Transportation Safety Board. She's live on the scene in San Francisco. And Ms. Hersman, Ken Cook Lee was a pilot. He's been flying since 1994. He's very experienced in 747s, 737s, and Airbus 320s, but he was still in training for the Boeing 777. Who is interviewing Mr. Lee, and was he injured at all, and is he able to explain to NTSB exactly what occurred?
Well, there were actually 4 pilots on this flight. There was a captain or first officer as well as a relief crew. And so we want to make sure that we understand how those crews work together, which phases of flight that they were flying in. And we do hope to interview all of them within the next 24 hours. And for us, we want to be able to corroborate what they have to say with what we're seeing in the evidence and the data.
And also, Ms. Hersman, anyone who's flown into SFO knows that it's a unique experience. You come in over the bay, and it's just nothing but water until you just basically end up on the runway. Was the uniqueness of the approach there in San Francisco a contributing factor to this crash?
Well, these pilots, they fly all over the world. They fly into airports. Sometimes, they're going to be a first time into an airport. Sometimes it's going to be a route that they're very familiar with. And so we certainly want to understand if there are any particular difficulties that might have been facing this crew. We know it was a clear day, 10 miles visibility. They had been cleared for a visual approach, and they didn't voice any concerns in the air traffic control tapes and their communications with air traffic control. No problems were noted, no issues were raised, and so it really was not until those last few seconds that they start to realize that they're having a problem.
I've seen a picture of you going on the scene and looking inside the burned out shell of that aircraft. And I know you've spoken about it, but what was your reaction when you looked inside and saw the extent of the damage inside the aircraft?
Brian, it's amazing. You see those pictures of the external portions of the aircraft, and you can tell, obviously, there's damage. They've hit things. There's, wing damage. There's fuselage damage. There's burn through, charring. But when you look inside the aircraft, that's when it really hits home. That's where the people are, and there are just a jumble of seats in the back section of the aircraft. Really, no semblance of order, and it is amazing that as many people got out, survived this crash, and didn't have serious injuries. Of course, our hearts are, gone out to those families of the 2 girls, but it could have been a lot worse. When you see that airplane, it really makes it real, and you think about the survivability issues. Most people think crashes, it's all or nothing, and that's not true at all. In many of the crashes that we've investigated, certainly in the last 5 years, we see a lot of people walking away from these events.
Can I just ask one more quick question? There is a report that one of the people who died may have been struck by the emergency vehicles that were rushing to the scene. Do you have any information on that?
That's a very serious issue. We need to evaluate what the coroner's determinations for cause of death are. We've heard competing and conflicting stories regarding that young lady. We need to make sure that we interview the first responders and any video that was on scene to understand what the cause of death was and what was happening. There's a lot of chaos in an evacuation like this, so we want to be very sure that we get it right and we understand what the issues are. It's a very serious issue. We want to take a look at it.
Well, Deb Hersman is our guest, the chairperson in charge of the NTSB investigation in San Francisco. Deb, thanks so much